Terra Thomas, welcome to the podcast. So great that you're here.
Great to be here.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I think we're going to go in all different types of places. Knowing you for a short amount of time, I've just sort of gravitated towards your energy, some of the things you're doing in your lifestyle, and you spend so much time on health, mindset, nutrition. So I'm really excited to bring this conversation and content to listeners today. But firstly, just how are you?
I'm good. As I shared with you before we started recording, it's a little cold in Santa Barbara. Like there is a fog setting in. So I'm just a little on the chilled side. I also, as we'll talk about probably eventually, did my sunrise swim. So I'm probably still warming up from that. So I have my tea, my turmeric tea, and I am warming up. So let's go.
Well, let's start with one of the things that really inspired me to talk to you today was health and nutrition and vitality and just healing. And you spend a lot of your time and work in that subject. You've dealt with type 1 diabetes for a long time, and I'd love you to speak to that journey a little bit. But, just from my own space where I'm at right now in this season, I feel like I'm healing from a pretty bad sickness that I got from COVID 4, 5, 6 months ago. And so I think just the conversation of trying to heal and trying to get healthy in all of these adverse conditions, I think is something that a lot of people are asking and talking about. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, well, how do we keep our immune systems high, I think generally, but when you have these really adverse health conditions, how can you really stay focused on what's going on inside and stay in tune with your body and manage your energy and those kinds of things. So you are such a gem, and I'm really excited for you to be able to share this and your learnings with everybody today. So I guess let's just start with that. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell us about how you got here.
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I've lived with type 1 diabetes for over 32 years. So I was in high school and I was diagnosed, and it's really been such a big gift in my life because I was taken as someone I was a competitive runner, and this was, brought into my life in my junior year, and I had to automatically, aggressively begin to reconcile what health meant for me when I had systems, people, doctors, family members telling me what health was for them, and I needed to fall into that. And so it was this immediate, at a very young adolescent age, this opportunity to say, wait, that doesn't feel right to me as far as their frameworks. And I don't know if it's because when I got it that I was 17, but immediately I began to question and really have to ask myself what works for me. And I feel so fortunate because there is a lot of focus in type 1 diabetes management on numbers. It is your glucose number. It's your hemoglobin A1C number, which is it's looking over about a 3-month period of time of your red blood cell glycosylation. And then you have all your other health parameters. So there's so much coming at me as numbers. And I really had to sit back and ask myself what makes me happy, what brings me joy, what makes my energy feel good. And it's not like it came quickly, it came over a lifetime. But diabetes has really given me that gift to separate myself out from the numbers, separate myself out from systems and what doctors say works for me, and ask intuitively, what brings me joy? What is my purpose on this planet, in this journey? And so I've gotten 32 years of lots of daily lessons to where now I really have an ease of living with diabetes. I was thinking about this morning, actually, because I was like, I know the diabetes thing is going to come up in my conversation today on Ashish's podcast. And someone could present to me a goal, an adventure, and my diabetes piece it's a consideration, but not an obstacle. And I really, really feel fortunate for that for me in my life, I don't see that as something I have to navigate as a barrier. So I appreciate that. So that's kind of the diabetes piece. Do you have questions before?
Well, I guess, was there like a moment where you were kind of treated like a patient, or you were so lost in the numbers and maybe, you were at a really bad place where it was a pivot, or you just realized pretty early on that like, I need to start taking control of this and not not let it consume me. Does that make sense? Is there...
Yeah, it's such an interesting word, the word control, because that is used often. Like, how can you control your diabetes? How can you control that number? And in a way, it was surrendering to the lack of control and being able to just meet it where it was and say, I use that information. There's so much, even in the doctors, and this is super helpful to look at patterns of numbers that have occurred in someone's life. That's great information to use to make decisions going ahead. We look at our gas tank. But what I've noticed tends to happen is people engage with the shame and blame cycle when they look at those numbers. And if people could literally keep it separate as just information, then it would be just information to make decisions moving forward. But I see it often in parents with kids living with type 1 diabetes. I see it often in people living with type 2 diabetes and a lot of other realms. But the shame and blame cycle is so often used in exchange for just seeing that as information. So for me, what I noticed, there were lots of moments where I continued to notice when the number was outside of an optimal range, it's like I didn't have the ability to be okay. Someone else or something else was telling me I was not okay. And I'm separating that out a little bit existentially from like the physical piece, but overall as a person that I was okay. So it was accumulation of moments. It's accumulation of putting myself in adventurous situations in backcountries or where I was my own person to make the decision. There wasn't a policy, there wasn't a doctor, there wasn't a reference. And just a lot of those different decisions for me and building the trust in myself.
What was really important for you to cut out of your life in that journey?
Judgment.
Self-judgment or?
Maybe it's because I got at the age I did. I didn't have a lot of layers of self-judgment developed around this. So it was really separating out someone else's judgment of me. And I remember I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was in my early 20s and I was seeing a new doctor. I just moved out there. And I came with the goal I wanted to run a marathon or do another marathon. I'd already done one. And he's like, no, you can't do a marathon. You don't have good enough control to do a marathon. And like, I kind of saw training for a marathon as helping me to have more control with my diabetes. And there was just this discrepancy, an incongruence really between their vision and my vision. And I went on to run like 8 or 9 marathons and ultra marathons. I didn't let that stop me. And I understood where it was coming from, but often in the healthcare system, you're not asked, what is it you want?
Yeah, you're just told, here's what's going on and here's how you should behave and here's what you can and cannot do. I totally hear you on that.
And fundamentally, that does not reach people's basic 3 psychological needs of competency, relatability, and autonomy. If you tell people what to do. Yeah.
Explain that more.
So the self-determination theory, which was established, I think, in the 50s or 60s, identifies 3 basic psychological needs, being autonomy, feeling the independence, the competency, the ability to have the capability to perform or do, and then relatability, feeling you can relate with others. And when that Venn diagram kind of crosses over into a triangle, that's where self-motive is identified and optimized. So when I talk to parents about looking at nutritional changes for their child, it's like, are those 3 players playing? Is your kid, have they tried enough new foods not to be overwhelmed, to be outside of that circle of competency of a new food, but enough to be engaged, to want to be participating? Are they feeling they have enough autonomy of choice? Or is it so much choice that they're overwhelmed? So it's finding enough structure for safety, but also enough autonomy for choice. And then same with relatability. Are you providing an environment of calm around food? Is there a lot of judgment around food? Are they able to just relate to being human? And that's when you really find sort of this triangle of motive as a self.
You know, as you're saying that, I think a lot about like just sort of the general place we are in, and maybe I'm projecting a little bit in terms of like my personal experience, but
don't we always though?
Well, I feel like there's, and just going back to your whole story, is like I feel like we are in a universe and a time where there's just a ton of stress and no one really thinks about this triangle of making choices. We're just lost in the in the hamster wheel of going and going and going, and it's just becoming this like really programmed behavior of everyday life. And I actually got some advice the other day about like having fun. And I'm like, somebody asked me something really simple, like, are you having enough fun in your life? Are you playing enough? And I'm like, yeah, I have fun, but no, I actually, the answer was no, because I'm not choosing, you know, even when we talk about work or we talk about our relationships, we talk about how we interact with everything every day. I'm not coming from a place of fun. Life has become almost intense in some ways, and we allow it to be. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, but
I do. Well, and it brings me back to kind of your intro when you were talking about sort of the journey for you from health in the last 6 months. What kept sort of popping out, I'm like, okay, I want to bring this in, is really this opportunity to pause and slow down and just find space a little bit, kind of away from that hamster wheel, and the settledness. And I think it's so easy to engage and think, even in your healing, there can be almost an anxiety to get to somewhere where you're not, and just trust that where you are is just where you are.
Well, but I'm not a human being. I'm a human doing.
Right. But maybe that's participating in a way that doesn't work anymore.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah. I find that there's a lot of this right now, and I get a lot of messages, and I know a lot of listeners are going through this, and forget about the news. Okay, we're not even going to go there. What's happening globally, but like, people listen to the news, they watch what's going on all these networks and this and that, and people get wound up about it more, which then creates more impact. And you know, it's almost like, how do we simplify our universe and kind of create these circles of influence that really allow us to protect what's happening? And I just love how you've been able to do that in your life, and you spend a lot of energy on that. So give us maybe some simple tips and tricks, or just like knock some sense into us about like how we don't get wrapped up in what's going around all the time.
Well, it's easy when you have this internal activation going on, whether it's stress or whatever emotion is coming up, to find a place outside of yourself to land it, right? Eventually that doesn't work. It works until it doesn't work. So when you are feeling stressed, or you're feeling a lack of ease or whatever, again, it's slowing down, it's pausing to the best of your ability, and just holding a little bit more of it than you did the day before. And then that, I think you're going to find an element of like a centering that starts to occur for ourselves. We're pulling that accountability internally again. I think we're operating as a culture and a society, and we are projecting so much outward. We're all in this chaos of trying to hold for everybody. And we got to learn that groundedness internally again. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Let's talk about parenthood, or relationships even, for that matter, because I think, you know, we have a similar challenge just for our kids in trying to create and hold space for them in these really different times. How have you been able to manage that, and what do you find to be successful? I mean, you're a pretty wonderful parent and really in tune with your kids and really present for them. You're incredibly adventurous. We'll get into that in a second, but let's just talk about like relationships.
Well, it's such a great day for you to ask that question, because my oldest is in his last hours of high school right now. And boy, has he there's like diabetes, and then there's my firstborn. We're going to talk about teachers in my life. So this is a great question. Hands down. I think I got distracted when you just started introducing parenting. Hands down, my capacity. I cannot show up in any way, shape, or form the way that I want to as a human or as a parent if I don't have capacity. There's no structure, there's no list, there's no color-coded chore chart, there's no amount of nutritional food in the fridge. If I can't find a way to give myself space when I don't have capacity to show up then I'm not going to be able to show up as the type of parent that I want to be. And that is the biggest lesson that I've learned from being the parent. And when I can find my play, like you mentioned earlier, find my way to find that capacity, my joy, then things just like dissolve. The issues almost take care of themselves. I don't even have to think about them with my kids. And specific to relationships with my oldest, he's 18, 6'3", 200 pounds, heading off in a month to go travel the world. When I see, like this week, he's like, Mom, I don't have any executive function. I cannot finish these last assignments. And he's literally sliding into, like last night, I saw his
senioritis.
Counselor. Oh my gosh. I saw his counselor at a social event, and I got off the phone with him and I was like, how's it going? He's like, I haven't started. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to your counselor. And I go over and talk to her. And she's like, he was not on the do not graduate list, so he's okay. Like,
he'll make it.
Sliding right into his last hours of high school. I mean, the amount of years this kid's removed from my life. But what I've learned is in relationships, showing up with capacity, that's when growth happens.
Let's talk about your adventures, especially ice dipping. How did you get into all that?
I remember as a young girl in May, my family went out to our lake cabin, which is in northern Idaho. And I remember going in the water, and it's like the first one of the season who got in the water. So I don't even know what age that was. I can't imagine I was even double digits. But there was, and I had like, I was like, wow, oh, I
early,
did it, early,
gutsy.
Early. So there's something rejuvenating for me that's always existed in submerging in water. And just in general, my daughter's named Lake. So I have this relationship with water that has been there for quite a long time. And then I started about almost 3 years ago, a weekly routine of jumping into water on Fridays. And then I started dating someone in the mountains. So that Friday turned into having the ability to jump in lakes that were covered in ice. And so then I just, wherever I am, no matter what the temperature is, if it's ice covered, I break through the ice and dip in. If it's, here in Santa Barbara, I do a longer swim and swim out to the buoys. So it's really a practice of being in water, no matter what temperature. But there is science behind cold dipping. Are you familiar with Wim Hof?
Of course, but please listen. I could talk about ice dipping for a long time. People know that I'm really into it, but please explain.
What is your? Okay, well, I'll explain a little bit. The way that I summarize it for people is, for me, there's been some challenges these last few years in my life. And so I've looked to build support systems for me. And for me, the cold water submersion has really been the ability for me to expose my physical body to discomfort and find a way to regulate within that. Mm-hmm. So to the best of my ability, it always meets me where I am, whether I have my head ruminating on thoughts or I have had joy going on. I go in and it automatically alerts the discomfort. And I go in and find, to the best of my ability, to regulate within that for as long as I can. And for me, it's 5 minutes when I'm breaking through ice. I'm not in there for 20 minutes or doing long swims, but it's 3 to 5 minutes of breathing and finding that ability to regulate my breath within that environment of discomfort. And it gives me the opportunity, when the world throws things at me, I believe, to handle it, to regulate within when I'm not in control of it.
I love the habit that you've created, though, every Friday, regardless of where you are, what you're doing, to go find water. I may steal that from you. That's really... Yeah.
And it started, I need to give credit where it's due. My daughter goes to Santa Barbara Middle School here in Santa Barbara, and they have this practice of, and it started before COVID, of rising with the sun and coming together as a community. Before COVID, they would have announcements, and then they would do a massage, circle up, and they'd do a massage on someone's shoulders, and everyone would turn, they'd do another one, and have a reading that the ninth graders would present. And then they'd have a word that they would all shout as they ran into the ocean. And then when COVID hit and that stopped, I chose to keep going because I really was finding it. I enjoyed it. And then I've continued it since.
Yeah, man, it's for me, like besides, so if you don't know, right, like ice dipping significantly reduces body inflammation. It regulates hormones.
Yeah.
I think people that have like skin conditions and allergies and all of that can be regulated just by a consistent ice dipping routine.
Well, when you look at the pro-inflammatory lifestyle or an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you're going from abundance to scarcity and periodically, optimally. But just from a food realm, we often tend to live in way too much abundance. And so the signaling that can occur when those are periodic versus chronic is very advantageous for your health. Absolutely. And that's what you're talking about. It's an activation on a cellular level.
That's right.
Of that weight. Okay. And then it's, you regulate back into normal. And so all sorts of things are activated, as you suggested.
I've also found that, like, at least before I got COVID, and we're not going to talk about that because that could be a long conversation, but before I got COVID, I felt like I had an incredible immune system too. And most of the anti-fragile ice dipping benefits of like pushing your immune system to these like extreme hot and cold conditions really expands your immune system. And I didn't get sick for years.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing. But like for me, but one of the best benefits is like for stress management. Like when I get in the water, like you said, like you don't think about anything. It is all about what you're going through, right? Like you can't think about anything else. It's so freaking cold. Right. And so to be able to like clear your head and recalibrate all your hormones and cortisol levels and oxytocin, it's just, it's like the best thing ever.
It is, and it's accessible to most.
Accessible.
I mean, a lot of people will talk about just being showered for the last 30 seconds, and finding your breath there. Yep. So it's accessible to most people. To be honest with you, my shower doesn't get cold enough.
Yes.
So I can't do that here in Santa Barbara.
I know. Well, you got a nice cold ocean close to you.
I can go to the ocean. Yeah.
Let's talk about your work, health coaching, mindset coaching. What do you hope to achieve? What do you hope your clients achieve? And what do you seem to be seeing right now with the people you're working with?
A variety. I definitely feel that stress that you're talking about, the overall elevated stress, this chaos that's going on, like a lack of clarity really on even where they want to end up. So a lot of the work initially is taking that pause, that slow down to gain some clarity on really what their goals might be. So I'm seeing that kind of across the board. But yeah, like you said, I'm a health coach. I work right now. I'm working with clients across a lot of different domains with nutrition and parenting, some relationship stuff. And then every once in a while, I don't work with just with people who live with diabetes, but I do also work with glucose optimization with people with and without diabetes, and even athletes that are looking to utilize glucose optimization for performance, because it's something I've been doing, for 32 years, but using a continuous glucose monitor since 2006. I think I've been on, so I have that knowledge as well.
Let's talk about diet really quick. I'd love to pick your brain about diet. I mean, besides just helping support a healthy lifestyle, and if you have, whether it's diabetes or some other sickness, tell me sort of what are your go-tos? What is your nutritional secret of maintaining healthy balance?
When in working with my clients, my secret weapon is meeting them where they are. I can present a meal plan, a structure, a way of eating that could like physically on paper with research is like the dynamo of dynamos.
Right.
But if you take someone who has emotional layers with food and you try to overlay that, it's a time bond, it's periodic, it's never going to last or be sustainable. So my goal with my clients is to look at behavioral paradigm shifts that are sustainable. And the key to that is really meeting them where they are. So if you want to add in, and we talked about it a little bit in the ice dipping, it's reducing the inflammation in your body. You're going to do that through, as to the best of your ability, how many vegetables and, fruit and more
color,
bringing more of that in. A lot of research now is starting to show it's not so much the foods, not just the inflammatory foods, but it's the lack of anti-inflammatory foods. So it's not that we're consuming pro-inflammatory foods, it's that we don't have an abundance of anti-inflammatory foods. And I think the thinking has been so much, what's the problem? What do I need to get rid of?
Yep.
And maybe shift that a little bit to like, what can I bring in? What am I inspired to bring in? Color, variety. Along the same lines, for me, if my clients are at this place where it works for them, I'm a huge advocate of fasting. Does a lot of that cellular expression that we were talking about, the anti-inflammatory cellular expression, putting my clients into an environment of scarcity. We are so programmed, especially with our children, they eat every 2 hours. And I want to preface that with, I'm not advocating fasting for children. That's something that need to be medically advised, supervised. Yeah. But putting yourself in this environment of scarcity periodically is super healthy.
Yeah, we don't talk enough about fasting, especially in the American culture. Like the Indian culture, Southeast Asia, people fast all the time. It's sort of part of 1,000-year-old culture, right? But here in America, we consume like crazy, and people don't realize like your body actually heals and recovers and detoxes, and your body needs to eat something or eats bad cells only when you stop eating food. Right?
Yeah, it's only activated. Yeah, autophagy is only activated.
That's right.
In that scarcity. So, and especially, in talking with diabetes, it's activated in the scarcity of insulin. And when you're looking at a whole population of people that have an abundance of insulin production, type 2, they're just not producing a quality that their body can utilize. So though a lot of people, will look at diabetes as, there's different kinds of diabetes. I didn't really explain that, but one type of diabetes, type 2, often is an abundance of insulin production, which their body is just not getting any of that healthy thing. Yeah, they can't use it, but they have an environment of a lot of it. So, and that is just, and there's all sorts of different lifestyle things, but fasting is one thing that's been immensely impactful.
I intermittent fast like at least 5 times a week, and it's changed a lot of my gut issues. And I don't think we realize how much of our bodily function happens based on what's going on in our gut.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, gut health, and it's all connected, and there are all different. I recently did a talk on to a group of parents about nutrition through the middle school years, and it was right before Easter, so I started with all this jelly bean trivia, and I asked the question like, how many different types of jelly beans exist, and it's like over 100, and we have that many nutritional theories as well. So it's like when you think of how many different kinds of jelly beans there are, that's also how many different frameworks we have that people have found success with nutrition. So there are some basic understandings, but it's really figuring out what works for you. But there's a lot of information out there. A lot of information.
So I want to ask you, as a coach and somebody who speaks about this stuff, what do you do when you have an off day? Or do you have off days?
I have off days often.
What do you do mentally and physically when you have an off day?
If I can get a nap, because sleep, I find alignment in sleep. I love to write. So these are some of my self-care practices I engage with. A tea in nature is something that works for me. I call these sort of my pathways back to my life force. So what are the things? And it changes. Like right now, I'm kind of in a season of not doing as much running as I typically have. And I'm just trying to approach that with compassion. And so an off day for me, space and pausing to the best of my ability. If that's not available, just that awareness of that I need that, but I can't get it due to whatever on my calendar or schedule.
Yeah, I love it. What keeps you up at night?
Oh, everything. The weather. So a lot about my kids and my relationships. Am I showing up in the most loving way? Can I show up with more love for myself and other people? And what does that look like? And then compassion for old stories that are still playing. So that's what keeps my mind up at night.
As we wrap up here, I would love to ask you, and I ask this to all our guests, is, to you, what does it mean to live a rich life?
what does it mean to live a rich life? I'll go back to my relationships with others and that connection and the synergy and the acceptance of when there's not synergy and the trust. So, and just the dance in general.
The dance.
Between the adventure and the productivity and the messiness. Like right now, my house is a disaster and I really don't like that. And it's like, it's all good. It's all good. Check in. So rich life is relationships and just kind of keeping it the dance.
Where is Terra going next?
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, let's see.
She just puckered up. She's excited.
So I will say it here. I am looking forward to, at one point, getting on a TED Talk stage to talk about the way that we're feeding our children is more detrimental to their health than smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That's where I'm going next.
Go deeper. What does that mean? What are you talking about?
Well, when we look at relational health touch points for our families and how we're raising our kids, and we're all starting to dissolve or be behind devices at a higher rate, the research is now identifying, or it has for quite some time, that the impacts on health outcomes throughout life, short-term and long-term, for the lack of that relational health. And the outcomes are more detrimental than what the research is showing has identified for smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And yet our public health dollars have gone toward policy and intervention and change around that. So I look forward to somehow being a player to bring more attention to that. And my platform in being the family meal and what opportunities have to teach resilience, conversation, delayed gratification, connectedness, coming back to bringing that back to families.
I love it. What's any final message you have for the listener?
Final message. Keep listening.
I love it. If people want to reach out to you, put all your social media links in the show notes, but if people want to reach out to you and ask more questions or potentially reach out to you for coaching, how can they get a hold of you?
My website is betweendiabetes.com. All my contact information's on there, and eventually I will get kind of some blog posts linked. I'm a bit behind there, but there's also some great insights on and perspectives that I'd like to write about and offer, as you've seen probably on social media. I'll post them there as well. So that's the best way. Yeah, Terra Thomas. Yeah, I'm a credentialed health coach, and what that means is some people can get reimbursed with their insurance by working with me. So some people love that.
There you go.
And yeah.
Well, thank you so much, darling. I really appreciate your time and sharing all your wisdom. And it's such a great opportunity for us to have these conversations. We are, at least in my ecosystem, we're always thinking about work and stress and busy and traveling and this and that. And I love bringing on people that give us a little bit of that perspective of what's important and how we can manage life in a healthier balance, or harmony, I should say, not balance. But just, you're such a light, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing, and hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be here.